And we're less than an hour away from the major players going into the cabinet room at the White House to try to figure out a deal to cut the debt. The big headline today, the president has put Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the table if Republicans will agree to tax hikes. It's an attempt to break an impasse. The president and Speaker Boehner have met privately to talk about the deal. Let's bring in the editor of the ReadReport.com and political columnist for the Miami Herald, Joy-Ann Reid, and Katie Pavlich is news editor for Townhall.com. Good morning. Good to see both of you.
Good morning. Great to see you, Chris.
So previously, the Democrats said that Medicare was off the table. Republicans have said tax cuts are off the table. What do you think, Joy-Ann? Is this a critical step by the president? Could it get things moving in the right direction?
Well, you know what, Chris? I read that Washington Post story about these supposed deals that the White House, at least according to unnamed sources, is putting together. And what kind of made me think that they're just reading their David Brooks and that this is a negotiating strategy is that the only specific thing in that article was the idea of letting the Bush tax cuts expire. Now, that sounds to me like the White House possibly maybe floating the idea that, hey, Republicans, here's a deal that no Republican can resist if we talk about indexing for Social Security, et cetera, and the two things they really want to cut, which is Social Security and Medicare, but you got to raise taxes. Well, we already know in page 2 of that article that Republicans have already said they're not doing that. So it just sounds to me like another way to demonstrate that Republicans aren't willing to deal. I just didn't see anything specifically there that indicates to me that the White House would actually go for Social Security and Medicare cuts. I just don't see it.
Well, Senator John Kyl said the GOP has agreed to some revenue increases, and here's what Eric Cantor said on Morning Joe today.
If the president wants to talk loopholes, fine. We need offsetting tax cuts somewhere else because we're not for raising taxes. That's not the right thing to do when you've got a sputtering economy and so many people in America out of work.
Katie, does this sound like a party that's ready to deal?
You know, Republicans have come to the table for months with ideas in what Obama's calling sacred cows like Medicare and Medicaid. If Obama really wants these talks to be successful today, he's got to realize that this isn't about the private industry demonizing the so-called rich. This is about an overwhelmingly huge federal government, and they've got to get that under control. And Republicans have come to the table with ideas for a long time. We can't raise taxes in this economy on the job creators.
What would you say is central to the proposal that the Republicans have made over the past several months?
I would say it's essential that we do put Medicare and Medicaid on the table. Paul Ryan came up with a plan. The House passed it. We're going into day 800.
But that's asking the Democrats to give up something that they clearly want to protect. What are the Republicans willing to give?
Republicans have come to like I said, they've come to the table with ideas, and their plan actually does protect Medicare and Medicaid. So it's time for Democrats to really realize this isn't about the private sector. This is about the federal government being too large, and we can't afford to pay for it anymore.
What about that, Joy-Ann?
Chris, I mean, if you listen to the sequence of what was just said by Katie and as well as by Eric Cantor says we're not going to even talk about the Bush tax cuts. If you read even in the Washington Post article, they said no, that's off the table. We're not going to let those expire, and we'll only look at loopholes if we offset those with more tax cuts, which means that it has to be quote unquote revenue neutral, which means it doesn't reduce the deficit. So it's illogical on its face to say, oh yeah, we'll look at loopholes if you give us more tax cuts. So that means to say they're not serious about cutting the deficit. They just want more tax cuts. And then number 2, Republicans would literally be clinically insane if they were to vote again to cut Medicare and Medicaid and even cut Social Security. But it sounds like they're saying, yeah, we want to take that vote again. So let's just say in the world that the Washington Post created that there was a bill that came to the House floor. How many Democrats would vote for that? Probably not very many. So you'd have Republicans literally voting a second time to cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which to me is political suicide. But if they want to do it, hey, go for it.
Well, I want to know who would benefit, frankly, if this deal doesn't get done. So that's another question we will ask another day. Joy-Ann Reid, Katie Pavlich, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.